What's up, everybody? Welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. We are here today with Robert, who is up in Canada, correct?
That's right.
And it's
Canadian,
probably
yes.
Canadian. It's probably cold as hell up there, right?
It is. It's
But
getting cold, yeah.
Robert, why don't you introduce yourself and then explain why we're here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I've been a longtime fan. I love the content you put out. It's just been incredible to watch the growth and even just the community you've built. Just the comments that you get are just crazy. It blows my mind. But I'm a naturopathic doctor up here in Toronto. I've wanted medicine my whole life, and I've gravitated towards the natural health field. And I've been intimately involved within the natural health industry from a retail, natural product health perspective, working for like renowned herbal companies. I worked for a herbal company in the US for several years, and then up in Canada. And so I've had kind of a unique perspective of combining both what I experienced in clinic. I practiced for 3 years, maybe 10 years ago or so, combined with the natural health industry, all these companies coming out with all these products. And then combined with my retail background, I worked in a health food store for about 2 years. So I started really understanding what it's like for, I think, the common person to walk into, say, like, you walk into a health food store or like a nutrition store, and there's a million products out there. People are so confused. They're so disenchanted by our
Absolutely.
industry. Everybody, right? They think they're selling, we're all selling snake oil, and we're all kind of there to scam them and so forth. So I've kind of had that perspective. And so, as far as content-wise goes, I've been drawn to people like you who've just built this community just genuinely to try and help people out and educate them and even just be there. And so that's really what prompted this whole thing. And I know you and I, we've been kind of having some interesting conversation regarding longevity and inflammation and bodybuilding and nutrition and so forth. So I recently wrote a book. Actually, recently I wrote it like 4 years ago, so it's been a real work in progress. I published it just recently, and that's basically what it's about. It's really more about like longevity, nutrition, inflammation, some of the things I hope to share with who's ever interested.
So I think what we'll do is we'll split into a couple different parts. We'll do like the person who's not like an athlete. So the person who's like a fitness enthusiast. Then we'll go into like the
Yep.
athlete or like competitors. So as far as a fitness enthusiast or somebody who's working out for personal goals and not competition, how does inflammation affect them in a negative way? And I'm looking for like if you know this, you go ahead and do the scientific terms as well as something that like even someone like me can understand it because you're going to have both ends of the spectrum where people are going to be like me
Yep.
watching and
Just
then
don't
other
plug
people
my
that are
charger.
super scientific based, which would be
Yep.
would want that explanation too. So if you could run kind of through both of those, it'd be great.
Okay, well, so for the fitness enthusiast, the how inflammation can work against them, I see it both from a physical component, but then also physiological. So, like the physical, a lot of wear and tear, and so I think the within the fitness realm, I think especially as athletes start to age, particularly, I think the way they train has to change. So that's a huge detriment. I mean, we see that
Right.
all the time, right? I mean, you've
Absolutely.
spoken about that too. So form, maybe using lighter weights or using lighter weights in certain situations, or really like customizing your training to what you can do and then what your goals are. Your goals might not be the same
Right.
when you're 50, 60, 70 as they were before. So that from an inflammatory perspective and a mobility perspective to prevent hip replacements or knee replacements, that's for sure the biggest detriment. Simply because when you have these big replacements, especially as you get much older, it's almost textbook. You go in for hip replacement, you end up dying of pneumonia
Hmm.
because of antibiotic overuse or something. Like that's sort of how it sort of plays out.
Now, when you say
From a
age, you mean
Yeah,
actual physical age? Because I have under this, I don't want to say guys, but I've kind of found that there's your actual age and then there's your gym age. So if you start training at 12 years
right,
old, Michael Hearn is the exception. He's like the only one to start training at
absolutely
like 10 years old and he's still
true.
good. But if you start training at like 12, 13, 14 years old, by the time you're 30, your body is 30 years old, but your technical gym age, the wear and tear is like you're 45, 50 years old. So
Yeah.
is it more towards actual age? Is it both where it's age and your gym age? Or is it just more towards the more you train, the longer you train, the worse the inflammation gets?
I look at it in terms of meds and surgery. That's sort of my breakdown. Maybe like mobility and gym age has a lot to do with that. I love Michael Hearn, by the way. I just saw a video of him and Robbie. What's the guy's last name? Robbie. Oh God. He's like 72. Robbie
Oh,
Robinson.
Robbie. Robbie. Was it Tony
Robbie
Pearson or
Robertson.
Robbie Robinson?
Can't remember now.
So Tony
Oof, this is
Pearson's in
way.
Las Vegas. I think Robbie Robinson still trains at Gold's Venice, and he is in his 70s. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
very inspiring
He looks
dude.
unbelievable.
Whichever one it was, yeah. But I look at it in terms of like medication. So as you age, you want to try and prevent as much as possible the amount and the severity of medications you're on, and then the type of surgeries you end up having. So I look at hockey players, not bodybuilders, but hockey players. They age very poorly for the most part. You start having like knee replacements and so forth. And that's not to say once you have a knee replacement, it's game over.
Right.
On the contrary, it could be fixing a problem. But if it's due to wear and tear and then you don't change, you don't adjust your strategy, then it just progresses, like a Ronnie Coleman type of
I was
scenario.
just going to say, like we're seeing with
It's
Ronnie
like an
Coleman.
extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting about the gym age. What are your thoughts on the gym age?
So gym age, like, because Ronnie Coleman, for instance, he was winning Olympias well, past most guys' retirement. But he didn't start training until he was like 30 years old or something like that, or 32 years old, something like that. So he was able to like grow into his 40s and mature at a different rate than the guys like, that were in their, teens when they started training. So what happens is these guys that are in their teens, like Dorian Yates is another good one. I remember Dorian, and he was like the first one I ever saw that actually tore something that was like publicized. So Dorian started training at a detention facility. He was actually locked up as a teenager, and they made him do some circuit training. And that's where he started training. Now, his style of training is obviously a lot of wear and tear in the body. And I remember when he had that bicep tear, I remember thinking, wow, that's crazy. Like, that's insane. But over the years, I'm seeing guys that have been training that same, like, teenage to 40s. I'd say almost all of them have had a major injury, whether it's rotator cuff, bicep tendon tear, pec tear, quad tear, ACL, MCL. Like, everybody's got an injury. And the guys that start a little bit later in life seem to not have those injuries, which is, there's some kind of correlation there. And obviously there's nothing, scientifically done as far as this quote unquote gym age. But it seems like the guys that start earlier, wear and tear earlier, like your body only has so much it can give before it starts to break down, and maybe it is due to partly the inflammation that takes place over time. Because you're constantly having an inflammatory response over and over again in your body from the training. But, I don't think many people have even talked about it. They just talk about, like, that guy's old, he has injuries. It's like, well, he's been training since he was 12. Like I said, except for Mike O'Hearn, I can't believe he hasn't had an injury. Like, I can't even understand how he's human between staying lean like he does, lifting the amount of weights, never taking time off. Like, maybe he's got the fountain of youth. He found the grail. I don't know. But so as far as the average, I would say, fitness enthusiast, how would they make sure their inflammation would be in check so that they're being the healthiest that they could possibly be?
Okay, so with the fitness enthusiast, one of the big, I guess, the similarities I see across the board when I look at nutrition is that the foods tend to be the same all the time. Compared to like the lay person who just wants, but like when you're an athlete, especially like when it comes to, let's say, training for, so I'm not a bodybuilder. I've never trained for a show. I've just watched a lot of TV, like Mike O'Hearn. And I mean, I love all these guys, yourself, but the nutrition's always the same. So it's you got your three different types of, you got fish, chicken, meat. You got white rice, sweet potato or potato, I guess. And then that's it. You'll have like a little thing of broccoli maybe. And that's on a good day. The other side, you'll see these, especially keto now, which is, I guess, similar to the Atkins. Keto is like everywhere. But you see, like a massive plate of food of like a 3, 4, 5 egg omelet with like sausage and bacon and everything else. So I just think when it comes to fats play a huge role in terms of inflammation. Within the athletic community, the fats seem to be always the same, which is not good for inflammation. That's going to create a lot of wear and tear physiologically. Mike O'Hearn, speaking of him, to draw him into this, that's probably one of the most interesting things I've ever heard out of anybody, where he talks about the connective tissue. So here he's talking about more resistance, physical stress on the connective tissue, and then the body rebounds and kind of builds back, which is really cool. But then at the cellular level, the same thing happens. I mean, you whatever nutrition you're putting in, you can control the way inflammation works. So, when you're looking at, let's say eggs is a great example because I think a lot of bodybuilders use egg whites in the morning, and then there's debate between whole egg or egg white. And that transfers whether you're an athlete or the regular person. So what you do to the fat, actually, that's the entire basis for my whole book is basically, I use cholesterol as the example of how to protect cholesterol. It just so happens, this is like my own, it's not my own discovery, it's out there, but it's just an observation I made years ago, which is that I think all of the techniques used to protect cholesterol and make cholesterol healthier are the same best of what we know to help inflammation work better and to age as gracefully as possible without like technological interventions, let's say. So you take the egg, scrambling the egg. So you're taking that cholesterol and you're heating it compared to, let's say, like over easy or like sunny side up.
Right.
That would be the difference. So I think that's the takeaway. I think with especially bodybuilders and athletes, if they're eating eggs and they are eating the egg or any type of fat, not to be cooking it, and especially at high temperatures. And then number two, to try and get as much of a variety of fat as they can if they are in small amounts, like, not to go overboard, because it's either going to get oxidized by the cooking method or it's going to get oxidized in your body due to like the stress response. And that's where the other stuff came in. We were chatting about, I think last week, about cortisol and all that, which might translate to the every person. But right. I think with the athletes, it's just their regular, that routine. So let's say before the show and then after the show.
Yeah.
Before the show, leading up, okay, their body's a machine and they're kind of just, they're after a specific goal. But after the show, to make sure they don't continuously break down their body forever, I think the variety is key. Variety of antioxidants, variety of vegetables, like put in other things to help protect that inflammatory response.
So I'm hearing like, I don't want to say dumb this down, but so someone like me, what I'm hearing when you're speaking is not all fats are created equal, plus how you prepare them changes them. Much in the way that an onion, as you saute an onion or cook an onion, it becomes more sugar-based than than if you ate it raw, which again goes against the whole calories in, calories out thing, because the foods do change as you cook them. The body absorbs things differently. Now, so the different fats, now have you seen, and I don't know if you guys studied this or not, like during your research, but did you see a difference between people that were eating, I don't want to say junk foods, but not the healthy foods as far as inflammation markers compared to the healthy foods or more organic foods?
I've never seen that. No, I've only seen studies with respect to cardiovascular health markers. So like after you eat like you go to like the In-N-Out burger, like specifically burgers, fries, and I'm not sure if soda was involved. Pop, as we call it, or soda, as my American compadres call it. But just like running shoes and sneakers.
Yeah,
Anyway.
they call them trainers over in Europe.
Yeah. But no, I've only seen like with like cardio markers. So like damage to the arterial walls, like they call it insult, like arterial insult.
Yeah.
After you eat like a high fat meal from like a burger or fries, but that might be because it's deep fried, like the French fries. You're taking oil and you're like deep frying. So just like your onion example, which is great, it caramelizes, it browns. You deep fry the French fries, you're oxidizing that oil. That might, I don't know, that probably, I believe it has a dramatically different effect on that insult on your arteries compared to just taking raw sunflower oil and taking a teaspoon of it raw.
Right. Now, we also talked last week about the omega-6 and omega-3. Now, people get an overabundance of the omega-6s. And I think, honestly, to be honest with you, most of the people in the fitness industry don't even know what they're taking in. They dumb it down to the point of fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And if you tell them, well, how many grams of, protein do you take in a day? And they say, well, it's like 300 grams of protein, right? And you say, well, how many amino acids do you think you're getting from that? And they're like, what? Like, they don't even realize that protein gets broken down into amino acids. Carbohydrates get broken down into glycogen. They don't realize any of this. So some of the foods that were higher in the omega-6, which people are getting too much of, which is causing inflammation, what are those foods? Because I remember we talked about crackers and stuff like that. Like,
absolutely, it's packaged stuff.
Where all people think all food is created equal, calories are calories. So explain a little bit why these packaged foods do not do the same thing to your body as olive oil or macadamia nut oil or something like that.
Ooh, macadamia nut oil, you got yeah, right. That's the good stuff. The yeah, absolutely. So it like so you tell me like how much you want to dumb it down, but let's say the like if you look at the pathways, which I never do. I always say I'm actually the dumb guy. Like I don't like looking at that stuff. I always found that stuff a huge waste of time in university. But the you look at those it's arachidonic acid, and then you go down these pathways, and it's sort of like I don't know if you guys ever had these like choose your own adventure books when you were like a kid. Anyway, it's basically like you taking a fat, and your body can either use it to create inflammation or reduce inflammation, and you need both. Like that ability to do that is so key, because you need inflammation. Like
Right.
it's a healing response. You get cut, it swells up and everything. Like it heals. You have white blood cells going. Like you can't survive without inflammation. You can't heal. You can't build muscle if you don't have inflammation. Actually, that's like the key component. It's so complex.
Right.
So fats can control that, but you need a variety of many different fatty acids. And so the whole omega-3, omega-6 craze was that they said, especially in North America, maybe in Europe, we eat so much omega-6, we don't eat enough, and that's from vegetable oils typically, and we don't eat enough oils from fish, let's say, like omega-3. So supplement companies started to come out saying, okay, well, you need to take in more omega-3. So they created these like omega-3 oils that you need to ingest.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they won't do any good, even though most of them are poison, but which we could talk about or not talk about. I don't know. Maybe another time. I don't want to get hung on my first show here. But really, you most of us are just eating way too much omega-6, and so before taking omega-3 or eating those omega-3 oil eggs or whatever it is, it's a good idea to kind of like look at your diet over the course of a week or two and see where they're coming from. Crackers are a huge one. So you go to Costco and you buy these. I don't know if this is Canadian or American, but Mary's crackers, which I love actually. I love these. These like healthier. Okay, so it's like a healthier cracker than whatever it's not a crisper. It's or a, I don't know what you guys have with that. That might be Canadian too. I don't know.
Like we have like Ritz, like Ritz crackers. That's like what I grew up on.
Yeah, Ritz. Oh, delicious. Slice of cheese on that, and it's just. But yeah, instead of eating Ruffles potato chips, you're eating crackers and you're dipping it in hummus or something as a snack. But those crackers, if you're eating it a lot, it's still omega-6. It's all with vegetable oils, and when you bite into it, you're still crunching on it. So it might have lower fat than, let's say, potato chips. So
right.
Calorically, it's way better. But that crunch is just like your onion example. You're toasting it in some way, either baking it or whatever, and that crunch is very unhealthy. And so if you're eating a lot of that, if a huge part of your diet and you're snacking on a daily basis, and especially later on in the day, I might forget to come back to that, but timing a day is so important. If you're snacking on these like crackers all the time, you're getting a ton of omega-6 that contributes to inflammation. So that can wear down over time your connective tissue. So even as you're putting in the weight, you're trying to stress the body out, which is great on a macro. On a micro, that inflammation is just causing that wear and tear, and you're breaking yourself down.
Right. So between saturated fats and polyunsaturated, there's a different response depending on which one you eat. Which the average person, or not the average person, but the average of IFYMer would say fat is fat. There's no difference. And I've been trying to preach for the last like 8 years that there's hormonal manipulation through food, or hormonal response to food. Like you can make your body do certain things through food. And those people will say, well, it doesn't work. But they're the first ones to point out when somebody looks really good, well, they're on steroids. What do you think steroids are? They're hormones. So you're trying to tell me that person had a leg up because they were on hormones, but you're trying to tell me manipulating your own body's hormones doesn't do anything, when the hormones are what's responsible for like changing your body. You have a stimulus, you have the food, but without those hormones, none of that does anything. And I think people kind of lose track of that, Now, as far as, I think where are we at for time? We're at 24 minutes. So I think we have to do more than one version of this, because we don't want to make this too long, because then people don't, stick with it. Yeah. We want them to get this information. So I think the next one we'll do is we'll schedule another video, and we'll pick up with how to apply these techniques to your post-competition to make sure that you're healing faster and that you're going back towards muscle gain as fast as you possibly can, as opposed to usually everybody just kind of shoves every food in their body afterwards and they blow up. And I mean, it's just like, it's not like you weren't not healthy for the first 12 weeks, so killing yourself for the show. Then they almost kill themselves for 5 or 6 weeks afterwards. And then the real kind of sitting back into things starts to happen. And if they get blood work, it's like the doctor's like, you're going to die, So I think we'll end this here for now. Robert, I
Cool.
appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for your time, man. And
My pleasure.
if everybody wants to find you, where would they find you?
If you want to go on YouTube, just search my name, Robert Horowitz. You'll see I've posted quite a few videos on different subjects. Any feedback you have, or if anybody has a health question, they can email me, Robert at Lifelongwell, or DM me on Instagram at Robert Horowitz, Horovitz. Any health question. It could be either bodybuilding related, which I think I'm not a bodybuilder, but anything natural health-wise or health-wise, I'd be happy to at least share with them what I can.
So I think what we'll do is sweeteners. Have you looked into sweeteners at all as far as inflammation?
Not as far as inflammation, but in terms of just putting toxic chemicals in your body.
Okay. Well, that's another topic we have to go. Robert, thank you so
yeah.
much for your time, man. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch real soon, man.
Cool, man. Thanks so much, Jerry.
All right, take care.
Cheers.